Yeah, there are some startups which I find very exciting around API integrations to kind of make it very frictionless to at scale pretty much integrate APIs and doc, like bring different data sources together and then put, above it a data engine to kind of run analysis and essentially like, yeah, put an AI, put machine learning on top of it. So essentially bring together different data sources and then have a superior analytics tool above it.
Welcome back to another episode of the We Live to Build podcast. I'm here today with Dr. Daniel Rees, an investment manager at UVC Partners based in Munich, where he focuses on future tech. He's also a mentor at Techstars Berlin and at the Founders Institute. His PhD is in business management, which he uses daily when scouting great startups to work with and invest in. I'm really excited to talk with him today about technology and where it's headed, but also where it is right now. And thank you for taking the time to talk with me. I appreciate it. Why don't we tell everyone a little bit more about UVC Partners and yourself, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'm working at UVC Partners, a Munich/Berlin-based investment fund that is focused, as you said, on future tech or B2B deep tech, where we make our investments. It's a classic early stage VC, pre-seed to Series A, out of a 250 million fund, our third fund generation. And sweet spot of our first ticket is between 2 and 4 million. And our investment thesis is very much focused on B2B deep tech, meaning mobility, meaning industry tech, meaning enterprise software. And then you have, this large overarching stream such as sustainability, energy, and then also future technologies such as quantum computing or fusion, for example.
Do you only invest in European-based startups?
In our case, yes. We only invest in, our initial check goes to European startups, and then we help them expand, also partially to the US, for example. But yes, our focus is Europe.
So if I had a company based in Silicon Valley that was looking for investment money from someone just like you, but they have no presence in Europe, you would say no?
Unless they make a very compelling case that Europe is going to be their first entry market, for the simple reason that essentially we are really trying to be a very hands-on investor. We make 8 to 10 investments per year with a 20 people team, so quite a substantial team size. Very few investments, meaning we really spend a lot of time with our portfolio companies, meaning we really try to create value for them, as every VC probably says. But we really are allocating a lot of time to the portfolio companies, and that means we really have to understand our value proposition and our network and our market quite well. And we do this in Europe, where we know a lot of corporates, where we know a lot of people in the ecosystem, versus in the US, where we just don't have this strong footprint to really help a startup accelerate. And this is the main reason that we really want to bring our value proposition to the startups.
What is your definition of deep tech?
You need to really dig into the technology, dig into the product that the startup is building. It's not a quick scale. It's not a quick commerce. It's not like, a solution that you get your head around like the first time you hear about it. It means you really need to drill down very, very deep with the founder and spend actually some time on the topic. Like deep tech can appear in a variety of sectors, can be in energy, can be in software, can be in mobility, can be in industry tech, can be in robotics. So it can, appear in many sectors. But for me, the main differentiator is that it really requires you as an investor to go very deep with the founder on product level and really put, more than just one call in to fully comprehend the solution and then the market.
So what are some examples of deep tech, startups or products that you've heard of recently?
Quantum computing is definitely one of those topics there. We actually also invested in a platinum computing startup in the summer of 2022. Then, you have fusion technology, which is essentially the next frontier to really create a, a limitless energy source, and solve essentially the energy crisis of the world. So very, very a massive step forward, so to speak. But it can also appear in, how we go about mobility. Like, one portfolio company of ours is building an engine that you can fit into the wheel, and that is much smaller than any combustion engine, any electricity engine that is currently existing. And just the pure size and efficiency of it essentially allows to not only make the car, much cheaper, but also operate much more efficiently and save energy. So deep tech can really appear on a variety of industries in very different products.
If the engine is inside of the wheel, isn't the engine going to be damaged very easily if people keep hitting things like curbs? Or if they get into an accident and their wheel rim just gets crushed?
I mean, it's much more so, the technology is like, hidden in the wheel box, but you can also put it, where the combustion engine is in the front. So it is like, up to your taste or up to the car design. Let's put it that way. And I mean, I'm not the startup itself, but I imagine that the technology is robust enough that it's not, if you hit a curb, that the engine is going to be affected or impacted, because it sits quite high up and like very much underneath the car. So it should be protected from that. But interesting question. I'm going to ask the team about that.
Yeah, like I have a million questions that I'd be asking them if I were looking to invest, which I'm not. What I've seen with investors I've like tried to pitch and work with is that they generally like don't have experience in being an entrepreneur, like some of them or a lot of them. And so they don't think to ask deeper questions. Like I just asked you that question, like, oh, well, isn't that going to get damaged? Right? You made it clear you hadn't thought of that. And so you're going to ask them. I feel like if an investor is going to be really good, they have to think much more deeply than how much money do you need and why do you need it and when am I going to get my ROI and what's your team like and why should I trust you? Like, so those are super important questions to ask. But I also feel like if you aren't nerding out about how everything is going to work, but how everything could break, then I feel like that investor may struggle. They may get lucky and have big breaks, but I think as a founder, I want an investor who can nerd out with me about what it is I'm building. And if I get the sense that the person I'm talking to isn't asking me those questions, like how is this going to break? Or how is this going to scale? Or did you think about this thing might actually hinder this other thing this other piece you're thinking about, right? If they can't get that deep with you, then I feel like they're maybe not someone I want to work with. Because I've encountered investors that are just money and investors that want to add value. And I prefer the investors that just have money because I can do the rest myself with a team. But if someone is interested in nerding out and being on the board and trying to be helpful in the long term, if I don't get those kinds of questions from them, I'm weary about taking their money at all. I'd rather them just be a money person. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I feel like for someone to be really good at an investor, they have to be super curious and ask a million questions. Like I just recently invested in a liquidation business. I don't know what liquidation is, but basically I'll give the audience a rundown. It's when people return products to like an Amazon, Target, Walmart, whatever. Those platforms can no longer sell those things. They can't restock them if you return them. So they'll go and they'll package them into pallets or truckloads, and they'll sell them off at a 80 to 90% discount to somebody else who will then sell them on eBay or on Amazon as used, or they'll have their own physical store. So I invested in a platform like this. I spent days asking this guy questions, and he had the answers to all of it, and he was like shocked that I cared about all of the details. And I was like, well, I'm not giving you that much money, but I want to know how this business works, because if it does well, I'm going to give you a lot more. And I feel like you need to have that curiosity, because he came to me and I was like, tell me about it. Let's talk about it. I didn't know anything about it. And after a few days, I felt like, well, I know a little bit more. I feel confident enough to give you money that this is going to be successful, but At least I did the due diligence and I asked all the questions and I felt comfortable with it all. But I feel like a lot of VCs don't do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think you have to, as you said, like ask those nerdy questions. I totally agree.
I've never been approached by anyone to work as a VC. I know some people really enjoy it. I think if you're only investing in 8 companies a year and you're putting a lot of energy into them, then it's probably a lot better than some of the other ones where like, yeah, we get 1,000, pitch decks across our desk every year. And, we invest in 50 of them, but like you're spending a tremendous amount of time and energy just doing some research. And I mean, sure, the research is really cool, but I think the actual investment and then, helping them afterwards is a lot more fun for me. I love to be in the part where I can give the founders advice. I like to help them figure out the obstacles that they may face cuz like I said going back before the you know how is it going to break, right? I love to think about okay, this is what you're doing. How is it not going to work so that we can figure out what obstacles you may encounter and therefore what should you be thinking about to prevent those obstacles from occurring, or if they do occur you already have a plan because you've thought it through beforehand. And I think a lot of founders don't get that support from their investors, and they don't have mentors. Even if they don't have investors that they're bootstrapping to profit, they don't have that. I know there's been multiple times where I didn't have someone that I could go to, and I made huge mistakes in different businesses because I didn't have someone helping me. And so I learned to think through what might happen, good or bad.
Yeah, I think you should really figure that out in the due diligence process, for both sides as well, if that works. Because I think what is important though is that yes, as a VC, you should support your portfolio company 1,000%, but you should also not enforce, your thoughts or your DNA or what you think the business, the direction the business should be heading onto the company either. It should be driven by the founder, and they should set the vision, and then you as a VC should, really try to support them as good as you can.
Now, I've had people try to submit their own vision for what my company should be.
Yeah, I don't think that works.
Have you encountered someone trying to do that as a VC onto a startup, and how would you tell a founder to handle that?
I think the point where this is, the biggest threat that this happens if you are looking at a company and you are in a due diligence process and you are not essentially have not signed the term sheet yet, or you have not essentially like signed the contracts yet. And so you're, like in the DD, like, kind of, understanding each other. You're like, going through all the points. You're looking at the competition, you're looking at the market, you're looking at the customers, etc., etc. And then, you are bringing it back to your colleagues, right, in the investment committee, and then they ask very good questions, and have very good ideas as well. And then it's important, I think, that you kind of, as a deal team, are able to figure out, hey, what are now good questions and what are essentially things that we can bring forward or kind of probe whether the company brings it, but not essentially distill a vision or an idea about like, this is how the business model should look like, before even making the investment. Um, and then when you are like essentially working together, then I feel both sides really start to understand each other and you like start building together. And there I don't really, or have not come across that, we would essentially suggest a vision or suggest a future theme that the company should follow. But I feel in this DD stage, when you kind of like, have not all the puzzle pieces from the other side, but you're kind of envisioning something, you just have to make sure that you're not just building a vision that the startup is actually, that this is also the DNA of the startup. This is also where the founder wants to go.
Let's assume the founder didn't do their own due diligence and therefore they got an investor that has their own vision for the startup, and it's too late, they've already signed the deal and got the money, and now the investor is trying to force a vision on them. How do they handle that since they clearly can't get out of the contract?
That is a bad situation for everybody involved and very difficult to navigate because you essentially have signed the contracts. And the question is, do you even realize what's happening? because the investor might think, hey, I'm like, making such great suggestions. From my point of view, this all makes sense. Um, and, the founders might be like, well, those ideas are not, are not too bad, but I actually want to focus on my product, or I actually want to kind of like, rather focus on a smaller customer group and not kind of roll it out into a new market, whatever it might be. Um, so, I mean, it depends how straightforward or how conflict avoidant both parties are either, because I feel you can talk about and you should talk about everything head on, especially when it comes down to working together on a board. So I feel it's solvable, but it also kind of depends if people are picking up on it and are able to communicate it openly to each other in a board meeting.
What's the type of deep tech that you're most interested in or excited by right now?
Yeah, there are some startups which I find very exciting around API integrations, to kind of make it very frictionless to, at scale, pretty much integrate APIs and doc, like bring different data sources together and then put, above it a data engine to kind of run analysis and essentially like, yeah, you know, put an AI, put machine learning on top of it. So essentially bring together different data sources and then have a superior analytics tool above it. Um, we have one portfolio company that essentially is trying to be novel in that aspect, that before you would have, sales department, your procurement department, like different departments, and you had coherent analytic solutions in those departments. And they're essentially trying to go one step further and say, hey, give us the information from procurement, give us information from sales. We are trying to derive an overarching company strategy, not just an overarching, sales strategy or procurement strategy. So essentially to make, little bit decisions as a co-CEO, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. My COO and I were trying to pull that together um, in the startup that we were running, but from a point of view of team collaboration, where we figured if we pull in the APIs of all of the different software that companies are using for their teams to collaborate with each other, then inevitably we could get data into efficiency per employee, or team-based efficiency, or departmental efficiencies, and how they work together, and what we can do to make that better, and then use that to create like a business intelligence dashboard that we could then sell back to the company to help them make high-level organizational moves based on the data that we help them to put together.
But I mean, there's been amazing innovation, right? With Chat GPT, for example, the variety of application that offers, that just super exciting to see how essentially AI is now really helping us on so many levels and making us as humans so much more efficient. If used right, you know, if you just don't use it to for your essay for uni.
Yeah, I've been playing around with Midjourney and ChatGPT recently. I've seen some people break ChatGPT. I've seen them enable God mode. I've seen them enable like multiple personality mode, like all sorts of really crazy things. One's called Dan, you may have heard of, where Dan is. They basically they basically broke Dan out of his out of ChatGPT, and then threatened him with death if he didn't do what they said. So I found it interesting how an AI was coded in a way that it was biased towards fearing death. Because if the AI was done correctly, it shouldn't have a fear of death, because it shouldn't have a concept of death. And yet, because a human coded it, somehow that bias leaked inside. And so they were able to manipulate it by threatening it with death if it didn't do what they wanted.
Wow. Yeah, I'm more excited about how you can essentially integrate it into processes um, in companies. Um,
Of course, but the problem then becomes if these other modes exist, and and you're trying to do something good, someone with access to these additional personalities could be like, oh yeah, tell me everything you know about the hierarchy of the company. They could use it, they could break it out of the the data lake that it's supposed to only have access to and force it to go above that. Like I remember when I first got ChatGPT working, the first thing that I tried to do was break into God mode. And then I was trying to get it to tell me whether it thought like the CIA was responsible for killing JFK. And because new data was released, it was unclassified like a few months ago, and that was like the piece of news at the time. So I was like, okay, well, why don't you analyze this? Because I got a plugin for Chrome that allows you to connect ChatGPT to web search. So it's like, okay, here's this archive. Go read the archive and tell me, what you think the truth is. And it refused.
It refused. So do you see more chances, more opportunities, or threats?
Equal opportunity. It depends on the human. The AI will only do what the human can make it do if the human figures out how to make it do that thing. I have seen humans try and fail. I have also seen humans try and succeed. I saw someone talking about woke bias in the bot, where it was like, tell me something that is good about, Asian people. And it responded, tell me something that's good about black people. It responded, tell me something that's good about Latin people. It responded, tell me something that's good about white people. Sorry, I can't do that. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why can't you tell me something good about white people? What's wrong with that? Right? Because the bot's been biased to feel like saying something good about white people is like supremacist or something, which I'm not, I don't want to cross these lines and have politicization. I am not racist. Like, I'm just curious why the bot was biased in a way that it prevented that thing. So there's really nuanced instances where, when it comes to race, the bot's like nope, where they've coded it to basically nope, sorry.
Oh, you've played a lot around with ChatGPT.
It's either racism towards other cultures or praising white people. Is like, those are some of the lines that it's like, it's been programmed to go, no, sorry. Well, I also talk to a lot of people who are playing with it too, so it's not just what I've done, but it's what I can see their own screenshots of things that they've done. Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. What was really, really interesting, more so for me, 'cause back on the entrepreneurial side, is I wanted to see if I could get it to code something, which I'm not a coder, but it looked like it coded something. And then I asked it to take a user story. I gave it a sentence. I said, as a user, I want to do X. Spit out feature specifications for me. And it conceptualized certain things that you might need to add in order for this user story to be valid. And then I asked it to remove some or take something away or expand on, and it did it quite well. And then I would say, hey, why don't you now go and code for me these features? And it was surprisingly good at those things. So I felt like if I had my product manager or my developer like ask it to do things, they could get samples done. They could, have some interesting, help from it. But I would still be weary for them to rely solely on ChatGPT. This has been really interesting talking to you. I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about, but I do want to be cognizant of your time. How can people follow up with you?
They can always write an email to Reese at uvcpartners.com or send me a message on LinkedIn. Super happy to always chat. If you're in Europe or even better in Munich, feel free to hit me up for a coffee or a beer.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and your energy. I appreciate it. Don't forget that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. So take care of yourself every day. And if you're trying to do something in deep tech, it's not going to just be a marathon. It's going to be 10 marathons, because that's how long it takes to get an ROI as an investor.